All right. Okay, first I have a question for you. How many of you have read my lecture notes? And if you haven't, why haven't you? The reason why I say that is huh?
I was just saying I couldn't see it on my Canvas. Like when I clicked on it, it just said Greenlaw's lecture notes and then a white page.
Really? That's
Yeah.
interesting. All right, let me just check right now to see if it works.
Riley, I got mine. If you go to his syllabus and you hover over it,
yeah. On the course outline, it's there for sure.
Okay. My bad. I was doing it through the assignment thing or the module.
And well, gee, there's nothing there. That's not very exciting. Okay, good. Well, yes. The good news is that was an older version. The bad news is it's not there at all. But if you go to the course outline, it is there. And the reason why I mention this is that it has all the important stuff that you need to learn there. There's a lot of material on monopoly and perfect competition and oligopoly and monopolistic competition that just aren't that important for us. So what you should do, what I would do is read my notes to figure out what's important, because that's what's going to be on the exam. Does that make sense? Darlene?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Good. So, okay, here's a quiz for Darlene.
Great.
Okay, it's not econ, don't worry.
Okay.
Who is at the bottom of the poster behind your head? This is
Smokey the Bear.
Okay, that is a passing answer, but it's not an A.
Oh, goodness.
Does anybody know who that really is? I know this because my son is a park ranger for the National Park Service. This was drilled into him. It's Smokey Bear, no the.
Right.
Smokey is his first name. So, now you know.
Just as a heads up, I work for the Department of Forestry, so if anybody wants any of those posters, I can get you like hundreds of them. I hand them out all day.
Awesome. All right. So, I don't have a lot to say tonight. Mostly, I figured I would answer your questions if you had any. We have 2 weeks until the next exam. And then we only have 2 weeks beyond that before the final, okay? So if you have any time over the next week, it would be really good to start reading about labor markets or pollution or international trade, because otherwise you're going to get crunched for time at the end. As far as the theory of producer behavior goes, the most important thing is that you can figure out where, or rather what level of output the firm should produce if it wants to maximize its profits. And the answer is really the same regardless of whether we're talking about a perfectly competitive firm or a monopoly or anything in between. And then the next thing you need to know is how to identify the price that they will charge. Okay, the third thing that you need to know is to figure out how much profit they're actually making. In other words, are they making money or are they losing money? Hey, Ashley, I'm getting a great picture of your fan. Was that intentional?
Oh, sorry. I was just typing something on my computer real quick.
No, that's fine.
While you're talking.
It's fine. Glad you could make it. Okay. So what quantity of output, what price, and how much profit are we earning, or is the firm earning? Okay. The easiest way to figure out the profit maximizing quantity is what?
MR equals, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say MR equals MC.
Yes. Look where MR equals MC and then go down to the quantity axis, and that's the quantity. Okay, how do you find the price? that corresponds to that quantity.
For perfectly competitive, it would be the same as the MR.
Yes, but there's kind of a general rule that if you learn, it will work for every market structure that you look at. The answer is the demand curve always tells you what the price is going to be. Once you have the quantity, you just go up to the demand curve and read across. Okay? For a perfectly competitive firm, the demand and the marginal revenue and the price are all the same thing, but that's an unusual situation. Usually they're different. Ashley, now you're sideways. That's really cool.
The Zoom won't work on my computer, so I have to do my phone.
It's okay. You're always interesting. I'm just glad you made it. It just looked like you were standing sideways, like
Yep.
or something. Okay. All right. Now, what about profit? So we know that if we're producing where MR equals MC, we are maximizing our profit, but that doesn't tell us how large the profit is. In fact, we could be losing money. We're just doing the best we can. So MR equals MC means you're doing the best that you can. It's okay. You didn't have to do that, Ashley. I like the idea of you being Spider Woman. Okay. So the key here is to remember that the profit margin is the difference between price and average cost. When you look at the quantity that you've decided to produce, you go up to the average cost curve, that's the average cost. You go up to the demand curve, that's the price. And ideally, price is greater than average cost. If so, your profit margin is positive. You're making money. Okay? So profit margin means how much profit are you making per unit of output. Okay? To find the total profit, you just multiply times the number of units that you're producing, right? But the important thing is that profit margin. Okay, so that's the most important stuff right there. Okay, one other thing that you need to be aware of is that in the long run, firms have more options. Okay, in the short run, well, how do we define the short run, first of all? Think back to the production and cost chapter.
One of the inputs is fixed.
Right, capital is fixed, right? So if you're producing something, you've signed a lease on a factory. As long as the lease holds, that's your short run. Once the lease runs out, you can decide whether to stay in that factory, to move to a bigger one, to move to a smaller one. You can decide, whatever you want. Okay. So in the long run, you can adjust your costs by changing the factory that you're in. Okay. Every factory is ideal for producing 1 unit of output. So what you do as a firm is you make your best guess about what demand is going to be for your product, and then you get the factory that fits that quantity. Okay? In real life, almost certainly you're going to get it wrong. Okay? Either your factory is going to be a little too small or a little too large. And what that means is that your costs aren't going to be as low as they could possibly be. So you're stuck in the short run. In the long run, you can adjust the size of your factory and get exactly the right one. Okay, so that suggests that profits should be better in the long run than they are the short run. And that's certainly one set of forces there. Unfortunately, there's another set of forces, and that has to do with competition coming in from outside the industry. Okay, the second thing we know about the short run is the number of firms is the number of firms. Okay, so however many firms are in the industry in the short run, that's it. in the long run, if say you're making super profits, your profitability is going to attract other businesses into the industry. When they do, and when they start supplying, what will happen to the price that you can charge?
Grease.
Goes
It's
down.
going to go down, right? Because the market supply is higher, so the average price is going to go down. And when your price goes down, what happens to your profit margin?
Lowers.
It
Yeah.
shrinks. Okay? So that's a reason why in the long run your profits may be less than they are in the short run. Okay? So ideally, well, again, from the point of view of the firm, ideally, you want to be in an industry that has sufficiently high barriers to entry so that you don't get a lot of competition coming into the industry. That's the only way in which you can keep your profits above zero in the long run. Okay, if the barriers to entry are relatively low, then in the long run, the best you can hope for is zero economic profits, which means it doesn't mean you're losing money or that you're just breaking even. You're breaking even in an economic sense, but remember, one of the implicit costs of being in business is earning kind of the average rate of return in the industry. So zero economic profits means a normal accounting profit. Okay. So, what questions do you guys have at this point?
What you mentioned that the firm you're trying to figure out what's going to happen in the long run, figure out the curve. I guess whose job is that in the actual firm? Like, who would they give that to?
Well, it depends on the size of the firm, right? For a major corporation, they would probably have a department full of economists whose job was to forecast demand. Okay. If you're a mom and pop grocery store, everyone does everything. So,
Gotcha.
so that's kind of it. But just as an example, in economics, in the economics major, we teach you how to do those forecasts.
Okay.
I have a question. So when we do the price and profit and all of that stuff, I understand the graph, but I know on a couple of the quizzes it had the chart.
Yes.
To me, that's really confusing. And I don't know if it's just because all of the things are the same
You
word.
mean the table of numbers? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. They should be the same.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And any table that I gave you would be pretty simple.
Okay.
You know, nothing more complicated than the total utility figures. And I try to make the math easy because some people are math phobes. So
I'm not. Okay. So.
Hey Sam, it helps me out if you just look where marginal cost equals marginal revenue.
Okay.
Where they're like both like $2.50, $2.50.
Yep, that's the easy way.
That's your maximizing profit level.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So then you can just like go quantity times cost or price, and you find total revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's if you just look at the marginal cost of revenue, it's pretty easy.
Okay.
I just have a question. It was one of the practice ones in the module. It said, in a market where positive economic profits are being made, entry will, and the answer was shift marginal cost curve to the right. And I wasn't. How would new
that doesn't sound right to me. Okay. You know, unless there's something else going on in the problem, I think that's exactly what we described earlier, where we said new firms increase the supply in the industry and drive the price down. That's the only thing that should be happening there.
Okay.
Okay. I can think of an example that would be different. If the existing firms, and this is more like a real world question, if the existing firms were smart, they might mount an advertising campaign to compete against the new firms. And that advertising would drive up their costs.
Their
That
costs,
would be an example, but that would have to be specified as
Gotcha.
something else going on.
Hey, Professor, hey, correct me if I'm wrong, but what about like if another firm enters the market, they start buying up all the inputs, making inputs inaccessible or even more expensive? And that was,
Sure. Yeah, that is possible, but not all that likely unless you're in some rural setting where there aren't a lot of options for employees and stuff like that. Yeah, that would certainly play out that way.
One other, go ahead.
no, I was thinking that would probably shift it to the left, making it more expensive, not to the right.
Correct. Yeah, but still it would shift
Right.
your costs. Andrew?
One other question, and it's gonna be hard because it was in a video, but they were talking about the supply curve for constant cost industry is straight,
Horizontal.
horizontal.
In the long run, yeah.
In the long run, but then in the video, the supply, it was diagonal up to the right, and at no point did I see any horizontal lines, and I was just confused as to how it said it was going to explain how the why the cost curve was
Okay.
horizontal.
I without looking at the video, I can't
Yeah.
tell you for sure, but here's what I would say. We know that ordinarily supply curves are upward sloping, right? And we also know that in the short run, supply curves are upward sloping. But in the long run, it's possible to, when you have a constant cost industry, what you can do is you can find the cheapest point on your average cost curve and then just double your factory size, double all the inputs and all the outputs, and your costs would stay the same then. So even though you're producing more, the cost per unit stays the same. That's what a constant cost industry looks like. Okay. That's not terribly unusual in that situation. But this gets into the whole discussion of economies of scale. With economies of scale, as you get bigger, your costs actually fall, but they don't fall forever. At some point, you hit bottom. And when you do, the long run average cost curve is horizontal. That's the constant cost part. Okay. So the question, the practical question is there enough is there enough demand in the industry so that a bunch of firms can get down to the constant cost part? If that's the case, then there's no particular advantage to being big, right? Because there are plenty of firms that are just as big as you are. And so there's no advantage there, okay? On the other hand, there are some industries that have extreme economies of scale, like electric power generation is one. The auto industry is another example where there are huge advantages to being bigger. So there's a story that in the late 1970s, there was enough demand for 3 companies to get down to the bottom of the economies of scale. Okay. All right. The problem was there were 4 domestic auto producers. Okay. And so what happened to the 4th one? You even remember?
Out of business?
Exactly. There was, the first 3 made it to the bottom, and then they could undercut the price of the 4th one. And so by the mid 80s, that 4th company, which was called American Motors, was gone. Next question. Sam, you're quiet today.
I'm absorbing.
Good. I'm not criticizing.
I don't know if you know, but I was just going over the reading and everything, and in other countries where they're, maybe not communist but partially socialist, would they teach a different microeconomics? Would they teach this? How would it?
Okay. The short answer is I don't know.
Okay.
I can't speak to what economics classes are in Russia, say, or in China, but certainly in the Western European countries, they teach the same economics. It's what we call the principles of economics, right? The way I think about the principles is there are some fundamental concepts that work in any economy, regardless of the type of economic system that you're in, right? So even in Russia, the law of demand holds. If the price goes down, people buy more. If the price goes up, people buy less. Okay. I'm comfortable saying they teach the same microeconomics probably everywhere in the world, other than North Korea, China, Russia, and possibly Cuba.
Okay.
Or maybe New Jersey.
That's where I am right now. Yep.
Really?
Yep.
You look like you're under a bunk bed or something.
That's exactly correct. I am at the in-laws, and this is the only spot where there aren't children or people.
Oh, I was going to say, are you in jail?
Yes, the answer is yes.
And we won't be sharing this with the in-laws.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well, hopefully your kids are having a good time.
Yeah, they're alive. Yeah, they're fine.
Kevin?
given that we got 3 weeks left, is it possible if we're ready, can we take the quiz early?
You mean the second exam?
The second exam, that's right.
In principle, yes. I haven't written it yet. So, but yeah, I'll try to get it done in the next few days or through the weekend. And then you could take it next week sometime.
Cool. 'Cause, yeah, we have 3 more modules. And then I
Yeah.
try to look back to the old stuff.
Yep. Good idea. Ashley looks really excited by that idea. Other questions?
So for the going back to the test, only basically 7 and 8 are going to be on, and then 9, 10, and 11 are
Correct.
okay.
Yes. Yep.
Say that again?
Just the theory of the firm stuff is going to be on this exam, not labor markets or environmental economics or international trade.
So like cost, perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic
Yeah.
competition, oligopoly.
Yeah.
So that's
That's
like
enough.
7,
That's
8, and
enough.
then your lecture notes, correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would certainly use the lecture notes to guide what you're doing.
So are any of like the previous 1 through 6 going to be on there?
No,
Okay.
not. We'll get to some of those on the final.
Panel. Okay.
Don't worry.
Makes sense.
Other questions?
Are you going to email us when you got it written and then just let us know when we can take it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
If you want to take it early, just reply to the email and then we can find a time that works for you.
Yeah.
I wish I had your confidence, Kevin.
No, the thing is, if I start cramming all this other stuff in my mind, then I'll forget this stuff, and then at the end, I won't have at least a couple of days to look back to the old stuff. So.
Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah, I feel you.
And this is only 15%, and the other one's 40%. So
Right.
better than the last one.
Well, hopefully there's a little bit of learning going on here. So, all right. Well, I have to start up my grill. So if nobody has any more questions, I will let you go and we'll talk again next week.